and that includes 7 ADB member countries that will benefit for the program. So the program is $170 million and is anticipated to leverage around $500 million investment across these 7 countries. So these 7 countries are Armenia, Georgia, Indonesia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyz Republic, Nepal, and Uzbekistan. We hope to have delegates from all of these 7 countries in the room, and I can see familiar faces. So basically what we are going to do in this session is just talk about the project, talk about the program, have a conversation. So there will be 2 parts. The first part would be a presentation of the program and the different outputs that it includes, and also an explanation of what are the activities and components that are eligible, but also how this program will be implemented. So we'll hear from Jörn Grötter. You've seen him in other sessions, including this morning. So he has been involved in the origination of the program, in the processing with the GCF, and is still working with us all on implementing it. And we will have online Mr. Oli Norojono. Is also part of the program management team, very familiar with ADB, has been with ADB for almost two decades, and is involved almost full-time on this program, working with the teams now. And we have 2 colleagues from the gender team. We have Claire Shamanak here, and Kanika Sharaborty, sorry for not pronouncing your name straight, because of course this program is e-mobility, non-motorized transport, all the things that will be presented to you, but just like every operation in ADB, we take the occasion of the program to mainstream gender in all of the project activities. So in the first part, so there will be an overall presentation of the program so that we are all on the same page. And then, so we will have the conversation. I'm sure you have questions, so that's a big occasion to ask them as we are structuring this project. And then in the second part, we'll invite and we'll have on stage the IDB project team leaders that are working with you on developing this project, so that they can share the experience from each of the country, and hopefully we can have some interaction and learn from each other. As I say, it's meant to be conversational, so everyone in the room is welcome to participate, ask questions, share views on the program. It is a very exciting time because this is really the moment where the action can start. So the GCF financing is secure, and in most of the country, of the 7 countries, the project are also shaping up and ready for processing. So that is the introduction. I will invite Jörg to the stage. So the program has 4 components. Jörg will present the 3 first components, and Oli the last one, and will talk to us about the eligibility criteria on the program as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Bertrand, and good afternoon, everybody. So yes, as Bertrand said, it's after 4 years, more or less, of formulating the program and going through the procedures of the GCF. Now it's really the moment when it's there and it's available, and of course the idea is to get it running as quickly as possible and have the projects there. So basically the idea is to show, I need to direct this. What the components of the program are. There are 3, there's a technical assistance, which we'll also look at, but there's 3 core investment areas. The orange one, which you see large in the center, it's large in the center and orange and bigger because it is the bigger component and it's the core part of the component, which is, it states e-mobility, but it's for electric buses, the program. But it is complemented by two other parts. One is on resilience in making adaptation investment to improve the resilience of the transport sector. So it's related to the e-buses. And the other part is also related to the e-buses, that you not only have new buses which are zero carbon or low carbon, but also have a public transport system which is more attractive and more convenient for the user. So that's why you also include public transport measures next to the buses. You don't just want to supply vehicles, you actually want to have a more resilient, low carbon, sustainable transport system. So if you look in the adaptation part, the projects need to make a climate risk and vulnerability assessment according to a procedure which is also followed by ADB and other transport programs, to look at what are the core risks, vulnerabilities you're having in the city where you want to put the electric fleets. That might be flooding, it might be extreme heat events, which will then result in different adaptation measures. So there needs to be a clear cause, mitigation, adaptation effect, history behind what you're doing. You need to analyze that part. All of the components of the program you're putting up, let's say, in an electric bus programs, components which are potentially under risk with climate change, charging infrastructure. If charging infrastructure potentially gets flooded at the bus depot or wherever you have it, then you might have problems charging your bus, or you might get electrocuted when charging it. So there are issues of flooding potentially. There are issues also of heat. If you have very high temperatures, you don't control them. One of the problems you might have with electric buses is that the charger efficiency drops significantly over certain temperatures, which again means to make the system more resilient, you will need different sets of batteries, for example, on the bus. You will need different types of air conditioning equipment on the bus, or you might need to put your chargers into container sets and cool them down. So that's basically what you're having as adaptation eligibility criteria. It's not that the program has fixed, identified, you will do adaptation measures in Bishkek, or you will do adaptation measures in Surabaya, or wherever you want to put the program. It's an open program, it has eligibility criteria, but it's not that you have defined projects within the program for what to do and how to do it. Typical areas, what you do in adaptation, you look at problems of flooding, which is the case in many countries. So you might improve the drainage system, that it is able to take over larger amounts of water in shorter time. You have potential of heat waves, which again has its impact on the system. It can also be if you make road lanes, for example, that you have problems with certain materials which don't withstand very high heat. You might make stations for bus stops with more shading to avoid the impacts of the heat waves. Landslides could potentially affect your bus systems. And then there's an entire procedure how to go, which is in the Annex 25 of the funding approach, which you can find by the ADB and see there how it's like a step-by-step guide how to do the adaptation components. So these are some of the investments which could potentially result. Not every investment project necessarily needs an adaptation component. It's not every investment of ADB, GCF needs to be screened against adaptation impacts or climate change impacts, but not necessarily an investment will result in that area. It might be that the city anyway has already investments in that, or you might come to the conclusion that the risks are not of major nature, or the impacts are not of major nature, and you don't need investment. So it's not a requirement of the program to have the component of adaptation inside. It's you can have it, but it's not necessarily that you have it. So these are some of the examples how you could go about with investments in the adaptation field. What is also interesting, the adaptation part is grant financed. So in contrast to mitigation parts, so adaptation measures are grants. Public transport measures, they are very open. You won't build a complete BRT. I mean, because of the financial means, that's not intended for that, but you can do cycling measures, you can integrate better micromobility, you can make public transport improvements, initial bus lanes, etc., route restructuring. So there's a wide range of what can be done. The idea is basically how can you increase the number of passengers on your public transport system. I'm not talking of increase of modal share, might be increase of modal share relative to a baseline because the modal share is dropping of public transport in many countries, so it might already be that you just get more ridership on your public transport system. There's, for this component, there's in total something like 20 million on cycling lanes, non-motorized transport, and some mixture of grants and loans on the other components. In cycling and pedestrian, it's also grant-based. The criteria there is that you don't get a revenue back from these activities, from building a cycling lane or a pedestrian lane. It's not exactly a public good, but it goes in direction of a public good. That's why it's grant financed, whilst if you put up buses, you have revenues out of that, so that's why you don't grant finance it. It's open for all of the countries and cities. You can do it. You should do public transport measures, but it's not defined what type of measures. So you have to see what's the demand actually of the city, does the city and the authorities think how you can improve the public transport system, and then it's adapted. So it's not a fixed program where you have to build 5 kilometers of cycle lanes and 10 kilometers of pedestrian improvement. No, you look at the circumstances of the city and what measures would have a large impact and have a reasonable investment cost, and that's the measures you would finance. So it's a flexible program in that sense. Potentially, you can also invest in interurban bus projects, for example, like the one ADB is also thinking of, where you move from one country to another even with interurban electric buses. In that case, you don't have urban public transport investments because interurban buses, you don't do that. So it's also there, you have exceptions that you have some projects which might, if you want to do an interurban electric bus program working between Jakarta and Surabaya with electric buses, you wouldn't do the component neither of resilience, nor would you do the component of public transport improvement. If you do a public transport measure, then it must be linked with the electric bus. What you can't do is just say we want to do in the city public transport measures, but we don't want electric buses. So electric buses are always a must component in any of the projects. You also can't do just alone resilience and don't do electric buses. You can't do a program or a project without electric buses, but but it's not a must that you do cycling lanes, for example, together with electric buses. Here are some of the potential investments in public transport measures. Just as idea, you see cycling lanes. Now, cycling lanes really have been defined also what is considered to be a cycling lane. So there are minimum conditions of width, that they're completely segregated, so it's not just painting a line on the floor. That's not considered a cycling lane. So there are definitions what's considered a cycling lane. Can be micro-mobility, e-scooters, things like that. It can be putting solar PV on the rooftops of bus depots and bus stations, for example, or even on the buses themselves. It can be micro-mobility, like you see these three-wheelers from MoveMe, which is a last-mile connectivity improvement for public transport. It can be bus-only lanes. It can be electronic ticketing. It can be lots of different measures which tend to increase the convenience and the ridership of public transport. Then if we go to the electric bus, this is the main part of the program, which has around 300 million in total envisaged in that part, of which 80 million from the GCF. Now, this is completely loan financed, but it's a concessional loan at attractive conditions, but it's a loan finance part because you, on the one hand, electric buses in all of the countries have positive total cost of ownerships. That means they're less costly at the end of the day than fossil buses, but they need a different financial structuring. That's what the fund is for. And on the other hand, you have revenues out of operating the electric buses. So it's not possible to do that with grant finance from the GCF. You get technical assistance, which is grant finance, but not the vehicle itself. It's open for all countries and cities, so there is no assignment a priori that Indonesia receives 35 million and Nepal 25 million or whatever. There has been ring financing or from the ADB, so that all countries initially have like a provisional assignment. But if the country thereafter doesn't propose a project and nothing goes for a few years, then that money will be used by other countries. So it's to a certain extent first come, first served, but with a certain time frame in which you can react. It is possible for interurban standalone. It's also possible that you do not do public transport measures because you already have a great cycling system and non-motorized transport, so there's no need of replication of efforts. But in general, you always look that you do have public transport measures. You have as target, have 7 projects, but it can be that you do it in 2 cities or whatever. There isn't a minimum size of the project, but the idea is to not finance pilots. You should have a minimum fleet size. Why a minimum fleet size? If you purchase 10 or 20 electric buses, the price will be very high for these buses. Maintenance will be very costly. You don't get the dedicated engineers for maintenance contracts. The charging infrastructure will be more expensive. So the idea is to have fleets of electric buses of 40, 50 buses at least. With that, you can get to reasonable costs. You get a much better bus availability rates because with that number of units, you get a dedicated technician for 2 or 3 years from the manufacturer, which is on site. If you do not have that, the experience is the bus availability rates are low because you get problems with the buses and nobody knows how to arrange it. So that's why you're going for fleets and not for pilots. What do we consider electric buses? That's an important part because if we talk of electric vehicles, some people include hybrids, some include plug-in hybrids, some include hydrogen, battery electric. We're talking here of battery electric 100% buses. So hybrid buses are not eligible, plug-in hybrid buses are not eligible, biogas buses are not eligible, biofuel buses are not eligible. It's battery electric buses. You also can't do a hydrogen bus because then we wouldn't have the GHG impact if you produce the hydrogen, even with the grid electricity in a country which has a high grid factor. If you produce green hydrogen with electricity here in Indonesia, for example, or even in the Philippines, you'll have more CO2 emissions than using a diesel bus. So, except if you produce it with dedicated renewables, then it's a different history. So it's no hydrogen buses. It's also not conventional trolley buses, which is an important aspect for the CIS countries, especially where in Uzbekistan, in Kyrgyzstan, in most of these countries, you still have trolley bus systems. Nothing against trolley bus systems, but that's not a new technology. And the GCF is trying to promote new technologies like battery electric buses. Standard trolley buses have already existed for more than 100 years, so that's not something new. But what can be financed is battery electric trolley buses, or sometimes you call them IMC, or you call them hybrid trolley buses. That means trolley buses which have a battery on board, which is capable of driving at least 25 kilometers without overhead catenaries, which is the standard today of what you purchase in a trolley bus. Now, if you have a trolley bus system, you really have to assess how old is that trolley bus system and is it worthwhile to maintain? Has it got another 10, 15, 20 years of lifespan, or isn't it cheaper to scrap it and put up a battery electric system with charging infrastructure? So this needs to be assessed from a financial technical viewpoint, what is better. But replacement of standard conventional trolley buses with new conventional trolley buses, that won't work. And an extension of the trolley bus line will also not work on infrastructure. What will work is that you say, my substations are still okay, my catenary is still okay, it will last for another 15 years, and I want to extend my routes on the trolley bus system at both ends, for example, without putting up new infrastructure, and I'll use for that battery electric trolley buses. That could work. It's only new buses, so you can't purchase used buses for the GCF program. No retrofits, only original equipment manufacturer buses. Retrofits of old buses cost you more than new buses virtually, and don't have the guarantees and don't have the lifespan which is required. As said before, no pilots. The minimum is 20 buses, but I would rather go towards 40 or 50, rather replace a larger fleet than a smaller fleet. The idea is also to have really large fleets to showcase for other cities that it works and how it can be done. You don't need to scrap the old buses. You can sell the old buses. Why? Because the CO2 impact is not the scrapping of the old buses. The CO2 impact is that you would have purchased now diesel buses to replace your old buses, and you're purchasing the electric bus. So you also do not replace a diesel bus which is just 5 years old. That doesn't make sense. You replace it when you would have replaced it anyway. That's the timing. And then you say, well, now instead of purchasing a fossil one, I purchase an electric one. Sometimes your old one might go to a rural area and be used further there and enhance public transport there. I'm Swiss, and in the village where I've got a chalet up in the mountains, there's a free public transport system. Well, it's not a public transport system, it's 2 buses. The village has 1,200 inhabitants, except in winter when there's 10,000 tourists scrambling around, but otherwise it's 1,000 inhabitants. Now, the buses we're using are 25 years old because you can't purchase a new bus. So you use the buses from a city which deploys its buses after 20 years, and you take these buses and then you can ride around in the village. So if you couldn't purchase such a bus for 10 or 20,000 bucks, you wouldn't have a bus at all, and you wouldn't have any public transport system in the village at all. So it's not that this reusage increases CO2 emissions. No, it reduces additional CO2 emissions. And the city, Zurich in that case, purchases new buses. So that's why the GCF program does not require scrappage. Scrappage does not reduce CO2 emissions. That's a conceptual error. You can use urban or interurban buses. You can't use school buses or tourism buses. So it's for public transport. It's not for private transport. And it's all bus sizes. It can be minibus 6 meters. You can cluster, for example, in many of these countries, you've got informal minibus services. You can also work with that. It can be 6 meter, 8 meter, 12 meter, BRT buses, 18 or 24 meter double articulated ones. Only that for the very large buses, you working on bus rapid transit routes, you'll need a different charging infrastructure than for the smaller buses. So you need to optimize the system. What are the components which are financed? It's not just the bus, it's the bus, the charging infrastructure, the grid upgrades you need, the grid connections you need, as well as bus depot changes, because your bus depot might not be adapted to usage of electric buses. It's currently diesel buses. So when you install the charging infrastructure, you might need to restructure your depot. You might need to put roofing on top of the bus depot, etc. So also these costs are covered by the program. Basically, you assess the bus system, identify the optimal system. You look at different charging methods, overnight charging, fast charging in between, fast charging at the end of the route, fast charging at each bus stop. There are different options how you can do e-bus systems. So it's important to not just jump on one type of e-bus systems. One needs to take care that what the manufacturer tells you of bus range you can drive has nothing to do with reality. That's just a marketing instrument. So be aware that you need to design your program and not let the manufacturer design and tell you what bus to use. If manufacturer X tells you the bus has a range of 300 kilometers, in practice it will have 150. Why do I say in practice 150? The 300 kilometers come from the sort, which is a technical manner how you measure it. That's based on flat, standard temperature, standard speed, no AC usage, no passengers on board the bus. You put passengers on board the bus, it's not flat anymore, and you're using your AC system just because of the AC system and the other components. In winter it will go up 30–40% your electricity usage. In summer it will go up 20–30%. So that's already a major difference. Now you can't drive your bus till the bus battery is empty. You want to drive it with a certain reserve, otherwise you get stopped in the middle of the traffic. You need 20% reserve rate. Your state of health of the battery drops 20% over 8 years. You need that. You also need to run your bus in the year 5 and not only in the year 1. And your bus driver might not be the greatest guy, so you might use a bit more electricity than the others. So you need to calculate all of these parts inside. And that's why the actual range you can calculate will be 150 when the manufacturer tells you 300. That's why you might need to change the size of the batteries or the charging infrastructure to actually be able to operate with the same quantity of buses like fossil ones, the same routes, also the longer routes and not just the shorter ones. You need to assess the grid. We've seen many cities where at the bus depot there is not the power available you actually need, so you will need to put the charging infrastructure perhaps not at the bus depot but at the end of the routes or during the route. So you need to assess the grid conditions also. And what is an important aspect of the program, that each project doesn't only include purchase of the units, but a maintenance contract, which is also standard in the ADB. You want that the buses are not 3 months later stranded anywhere in the depot. You want that they're used. So you normally make a 2 to 3 year standard maintenance contract, which includes guaranteed bus availability rates, which includes repairs and maintenance of the buses, which includes training of all the mechanics, etc. So these are the components of the program. It's very open to a certain extent. It doesn't define cities, it doesn't define what types of buses or how you want to do it. But I think the important part, we try to have a systemic approach that you really look at climate impacts. If you need something in resilience, then you add it on. Look at the public transport system to use the electric buses to modernize also your system and include other components which are important to have for the user, a high convenience and increased attractiveness of the public transport system and the intermodality and non-motorized transport. So using the technology to give a modern impact, but also to get to a system which is more low carbon, sustainable, or resilient. So I think that's the important components, and basically goes through the ADB system thereafter. It's not that you need to go through the GCF anymore. The GCF doesn't approve individual projects. It goes through the ADB thereafter. So you don't need to go through all the hassles of GCF anymore. That's why we made a program. Instead of doing 7 individual projects, it's much easier to do 1 program, and then it goes simply through the normal procedures. Thanks.
Thank you. I like your conclusion, because the beauty of the program is that the funds, whether it is accessing the loan or the grant, is readily available. And it is when we go project by project, so it's a process that takes some time and effort. So this is already secure. So now we have time to really focus on structuring the best project tailored to your cities and the particular needs. I like this presentation because you have really shown that the program is flexible and open as much as we could, but what is fixed and the criteria that the program has to follow is only to maximize the impact of the project that will be developed and make sure that no dimension will be forgotten in the way we structure it. So thank you. There is one last component in the program, and I will invite Oli, who is online with us, to present it to us. Oli? Okay, we can see you and your slide. Please, Oli.
All right. Sorry. Okay, can you hear me, Bertrand?
Loud and clear. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Bertrand. Good afternoon, everyone. Apologies that I have to do this virtually, but I'd like to share with you the 4th component of the program that ADB submitted to GCF and it was approved by the board. So this, technical assistance component is part of the overall funding proposals. So let me start with, why do we need this technical assistance? I think Jörg has explained to all of us the 3 components that the ADB submitted as part of the E-Mobility program. So first reason why we need the technical assistance is to help countries address the barriers of probably ineffective e-mobility policies that exist in individual countries. That was important to be able to make the investment effective and efficient. Second reason why technical assistance is needed is to look for effective business model for e-bus deployment. When you see from the previous presentations, the number of buses are open, so you can go from 20 to 40. This would require some business models that would be the best to deploy the electric buses. And third reason is to help mainstream climate resilience into design, planning, and operation of the e-buses. Component one was about to help investment adapted to extreme climate. So that requires some support on how we can do that in practice. Fourth reason is to ensure that the e-buses that is invested would be inclusive, taking into account different customers of the bus, elderly, women, and others. So, and lastly, is to help us coordinate and apply a consistent approach of this multiple country program. So as we can all understand that the individual project will be prepared by different countries. So we need to make sure that the methodology are applicable or will be the same or similar. The approach would be consistent, and also that we are able to have some resources to manage the overall program. Yeah. So what would be the scope of the assistance? Basically, there are four major scope of the assistance. One is to prepare projects or project preparation, and to help countries prepare your projects. Second is on policy advisory assistance, like these policies or preparing roadmaps. We will go into more details on what can be covered under the individual scope. And the third one is the capacity building and knowledge sharing, because it covers 7 countries, so one can learn from what the others are doing, so that we have some improved knowledge on the e-buses investment. Fourth one is the program management support, monitoring, and evaluation. The GCF require us to closely monitor the implementation and evaluate the progress. So we will do midterm review, and we also do at the final period of the program. So the budget that was approved by GCF is 9.92 million. This is a GCF grant, and ADB is committed to provide 2.5 million. It can come from ADB own resources, or it can come from other resources. So these are the scope and the budget that are available to support the program. So okay, let me now go to a bit more detail on the scope. What can be covered under project preparation? It can be feasibility study and due diligence. So when you prepare a project, you need to do some feasibility in terms of financial, economics, social, and all. It can also cover, it can help do public transport planning as a first stage before going into individual line in projects. We can help look into bus technology solutions and design specifications. As I mentioned earlier, it can help develop the business model and structure the project. It can be, but I want to mention that this is software in operations project, but it doesn't stop you to to design it as a PPP, for example. And the beauty of this TA grant from GCF is for you to do detailed design, it can be financed under the grant. And then finally, it can also help support procurement process. In the policy advisory assistance, it can cover so many things, and these are all open, and it will be depending upon the need of the individual countries. It doesn't have to be like what is on the list, but this can be, this is the list that you can think of and then can be part of the policy advisory services. A long-term e-mobility strategy in individual countries, urban risk and vulnerability assessment that can help you design projects to under output one, under all component one. It can also help countries to develop a roadmap on public transport electrification if you don't have one. And it can also help plan battery charging infrastructures. And it can also help projects to design more cost-effective urban resilience intervention. Third one is on the capacity building and knowledge sharing. You know, an O&M of the e-buses, O&M for battery charging stations. These are the two examples. And technical performance monitoring of electric vehicles. You can look at how you would be able to handle the batteries, reuse, recycle, and disposals, and can help design, can help mainstream gender into the project. And also SEA stands for sexual and harassment into project design. I believe the next session will also be looking into this into more detail. And this would help share knowledge across the multiple countries. And finally, it helps ADB to manage and monitor and evaluate the progress of the program. And so this is the final slide from me, and this is how ADB is going to, because these are all what I mentioned earlier are what we proposed to GCF, and now we need to be translated into ADB's practice. So what ADB is going to do is to, prepare one single regional technical assistance, which will, have two big blocks. One is on the generic assistance scope that applicable to all program countries. And second block is assistance which are specific to individual countries. So we will have these two blocks under one single regional technical assistance, accessible to all 7 countries. And this will be managed by the program manager, but the country-specific assistance scope would be under individual projects' responsibility to design and to implement it. So it is important for ADB to get some input from individual countries on what assistance that is needed to help design and implement the e-mobility program. So on that note, I think I finished my presentation. Bertrand, I'll back to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Oli, and it was all very clear. I also think that you will have some questions later. So you're staying with us, of course. So if you have a question, we will be able to ask them to Oli and other speakers and team member. After we have covered the gender dimension of the program, So now I will invite Claire to talk to us about the gender requirements of the program.
Hi, everyone. I'm from the Gender Equality Division at ADB, and I'm thrilled to see you all today. So what I wanted to do today is to go over how gender is being integrated into the program, and my colleague will go into SCAH. And so first, I want to ground the conversation. Why gender? And I'm hoping this group does not need to be convinced of this. But in case we have a few skeptics left in the room, I wanted to reiterate some key gender considerations. We know that gender is a primary determinant of an individual's access to suitable transport. Of course, there are other intersectional factors that we need to consider, right? Like age, income, disability, location, and ethnicity are all very important factors. But when we look at these four issues in terms of women and men's different travel patterns, we know, for example, that women take shorter trips, they trip chain, they're likely to have more non-work related trips, and this is all due to their caregiving responsibilities. So when we don't keep that into account when designing public transport systems, we are seriously impeding women's mobility. We also know that they use transport differently, right? So women tend to use public transport more than men do, and that's often due to lower incomes. Women are not able to own as many private vehicles. They tend to use non-motorized forms of transport, so walking and biking. And of course, this is why it's so important to have the interventions that have been mentioned earlier today around upgrading walkways, looking at cycling, because those will really benefit women who tend to be the primary users now of those forms of transport. We know that affordability and standardized fares are a high priority for women, right? And that's something that needs to be considered as well. All of this, of course, often doesn't get considered because we see very low representation of women in the transport sector. So both in terms of employment and leadership. And we know that the numbers have stayed around under 20% in our region and globally. And of course, when we don't take into account all of these considerations, we are not looking at some serious issues, although that is now changing, around women's safety and security. We know that women report high levels of sexual harassment on public transport across all countries. And of course, this is an issue in our region as well. And we are slowly starting to see agencies respond to this by looking at trainings for their staff, protocols and referral systems for survivors of harassment, and looking at awareness campaigns. And I'll talk about that a little bit because that was integrated, and Kanika will go into it much more, into the program to acknowledge those issues. So when we think about e-mobility, I mean, it can be a driver for when we hope and we want it to be a driver for gender equality, but it could also perpetuate existing gender inequalities if we don't think about the gender considerations that I outlined in the previous slide. So we know, for example, that women are more likely, as I mentioned before, to select low carbon mobility options. That is often out of necessity, frankly, right? And so looking at the issues, as I said, of cycling and walking and last mile mobility services like micro-mobility will really benefit women. But another thing to consider is that we don't truly and have not fully studied the gender differences in the adoption of new and emerging transport technologies. And so that's why it's very important to be doing things like collection of census aggregated data and baseline surveys, which this program will be doing. Of course, we can't, sorry, I didn't want to go back that far yet. In order to ensure women's participation in the e-mobility transition, they have to be involved in research and development, otherwise their needs are likely not to be met. So we're unintentionally creating an early market gender divide. So that could be anything from where are you putting the charging infrastructure? How are you designing these vehicles, right? If women are not involved from the beginning, then we are forcing them to adapt to a system designed by men for men, which is the current transport system, or we can use this as an opportunity, as I said, to have this be a driver of gender equality. We don't have good data on women's employment in e-mobility, but we know, and it is likely that it is reflective of the greater statistics that we have on the transport sector. And it's something that we need to look into because according to a recent LinkedIn report, for every 100 men who are considered green talent through that platform, only 66 women are identified as green talent. So we're already seeing in our green skills and green jobs industries that the same gender inequalities are being replicated. This is where it's very important to think about, and this is also being weaved into the program, looking at women's entrepreneurship, right? And looking at innovative financing so that they can support and uptake the upgrading of electric mobility through their enterprises. And of course, underpinning all this is women's leadership to make sure that sustainable e-mobility plans are inclusive as well. So now that I've given you kind of the broader context, bringing it back to ADB and what our operational plan for gender equality is, we know that transport can be an enabler for gender equality. And that can be done through a variety of ways, right? That's through women's economic empowerment, by increasing access to markets and schools and health services, by reducing women's time poverty. So we really put that within the framework that we have of gender equality. We see that transport cuts across all of these pillars. Just to go very briefly on our gender mainstreaming system. So we have corporate targets that actually have already been exceeded, and that we're going to likely change and update as we update our next corporate results framework at the end of this year. But just to point out that, and you'll see this in the next slide, we are requiring that all the projects financed through this program be either gender equity theme or effective gender mainstreaming. And the reason for that is that requires a gender action plan where you're very clear what is the program doing to reduce and address gender gaps. And then if you're looking at your indicators and your design and monitoring framework, the majority of your outputs have to have at least one gender performance indicator that's reducing gender gaps, right? So we're really getting, just so you know, how detailed this needs to be, and of course the expertise that will be needed in each program to implement these activities. So what does this look like exactly? And there's more detail online through the Gender Action Plan, but I wanted to pull out a few. So really you can look at this in terms of framework of women's mobility, jobs, and safety. I think that's a good way to think about these three core pillars, right? And so part of that is we can't look at increasing women's mobility without making sure it's included in the mobility plans that are being formulated by the program, and thinking about increasing knowledge of transport officials on how to include gender in urban transport projects. In terms of jobs, looking at targeting at least 35% of women in skilled jobs, that's a critical mass. And of course, we're looking at women as e-bus drivers, as e-van drivers, making sure that, I think in the past, and we've looked through other transport projects, that we've had some success putting women through non-skilled work, and now the time is to focus on skilled work. And then finally, which I'll turn this over to my colleague, looking at interventions to prevent and respond to SEAH and really increase women's safety in public transport. So I'll just pause here and turn over to Kanika.
Thank you, Claire, and good afternoon, everyone. I am Konika. I'm from Gender Equality Division. As Claire already mentioned about that sexual exploitation, abuse, and harassment, so my presentation is about addressing sexual exploitation, abuse, and harassment in ADB finance operations. SEA, it's also known as a SEA, are serious violations of human rights that affect individuals, communities, and societies worldwide. It is also crucial for organizations, including ADB, to take proactive measures to prevent and address SEA in their operations. So first, let's see that GCF Environment and Social Policy Statement about SEA. So if you see that GCF has zero tolerance policy for all forms of SEA in GCF finance activities. Accredited entities and GCF finance activities must prevent and respond effectively to SEA in survivor-centered and gender-responsive way. And ADB also has been developed 2 good practice note on addressing SEA. And these good practice note actually developed to support ADB staff, borrowers, executive and implementing agency staffs, and contractors in designing and implementing measures to address SEA. It also outlines the responsibility of incorporating, implementing, and monitoring and reporting. It also provides guides, guidelines, set of tools, checklists, templates, and minimum good practice standards to tackle SEA during project design and implementation. It is also important to note that ADB safeguard policy is currently under review, and the draft incorporates SEA into several ESF standards. The new safeguard policy is expected to be approved in late 2024, with effectively from late 2025. So I'm going to share this. These 2 are our good practice note here. I would appreciate that if you could see, and they are available in the website. So for details information, you can get all the information from these 2 good practice note. So guiding principle for addressing SEA, one of the core principles is the establishment of zero tolerance for inaction. Organization must prioritize the prevention and reporting of SEA incident, ensuring that all complaints are taken seriously and investigated promptly in a survivor-centered approach and gender-responsive way. Organizations should aim to have a dedicated 24-hour response system in place where victim can access support, receive counseling, and organization initiate investigations. Timely response also demonstrates an organization's commitment to accountability and addressing SEA incidents promptly. Addressing SEA also requires a shared responsibility among individuals and organizations. Organizations should encourage a culture of accountability and emphasize the importance of reporting SEA incidents. There is also proportionate action that organizations should take appropriate action in response to SEA incident, ensuring a proportionate response that reflects the severity of the incident and any potential risk. Recognizing the diverse culture, legal and societal context in different countries, organizations should adapt to the SEA response strategies accordingly. Now I will talk about that how SEA prevention, mitigation, and response will be in the project implementation stage. So if you see that the first section focuses on conducting a comprehensive SEA risk assessment and categorizing risk based on their severity and impact on the project. By identifying project risk, we can effectively prioritize our efforts and develop appropriate strategies to mitigate them. Then do the SEA risk capacity assessment and needs for support. Create a detailed service mapping document outlining the available support network, including mental health, legal, counseling services to facilitate seamless referrals. Develop a clear SEA action plan. This plan will outline necessary steps, actions, and resources and responsibilities required to prevent SEA incidents, respond to them swiftly and appropriately, and promote a culture of respect, safety, and equality throughout the project. It's also important to ensure that SEA should be integrated into GRM, ensuring a prompt and confidential reporting, investigation, and response system for SEA-related cases. To track progress and ensure accountability, organization has to establish a comprehensive project monitoring system with regular monitoring on SEA incident and capacity building initiative. So this is how organization can also be, mitigate risk and manage the SEA risk and create a sustainability into the organization, institutional level. So it is essential to incorporate SEA requirements into bidding documents and contracts, as well as contractors' code of conduct with explicit SEA provisions, importance of establishing an effective SEA reporting mechanism within the project GRM system, referral system for SEA survivors, awareness raising and training for all workers, consultants, and community members, a case handling mechanism with standard operating procedures and SEA investigators that needs to be hired by the organization, of course, as well as monitoring and reporting to SEA, to ADB and GCF. So this is what my presentation about SEA. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Kanika and Claire. So, so this is very clear. All these projects would be either gender equity team or effective gender mainstreaming. And this is a great opportunity also. So we are talking about e-mobility, improving mobility condition, but these projects are genuinely supporting gender equality as well. A lot of things have been said, so I will invite our speaker to go back to the stage and we will take questions. Maybe we'll put Oli on the screen as well. So any question you may have, please introduce yourself before asking your question. Yes, please.
Thank you very much for your presentations. Thank you, Jörg. I have two questions. One is for...
Excuse me, could you please introduce
sorry,
yourself so that everyone
I'm
knows
Khurshid
you?
from Uzbekistan Resident Mission. I'm transport specialist. And my first question is to Jörg, and second is for gender team. On project, I want to ask if there are some criteria or indexes that you can evaluate the readiness of the country for this project. I mean, everything. Maybe you can evaluate their infrastructure of electricity infrastructure, maybe outdated power lines, maybe it's thermoelectric generation or something like this. Are there any criteria when you can think that your project will be the most valuable and available for this country? And the second on the gender, my question is it possible to make something like knowledge sharing events, or just to keep the institutional memory for gender for ladies? Because sometimes when the gender control and readiness mechanism works only during the project period, during 4 or 5 years. What about after these years? What about during the whole life of the using of electric buses or whatever, any kind of project there will be? Because sometimes it needs the change of the mind of people, change this culture, maybe intervenes to the culture of the country. It's very difficult steps. Only by maybe knowledge sharing to include this to educational process, so going out of the transport. This was my second question. Thank you for your answers.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. Well, on the first question, all of the countries are eligible, and there's nothing like an additional criteria which you need to fulfill in a city or in a country. It's clear that the impact isn't the same in terms of CO2, let's say with the grid factor in Kazakhstan than with the grid factor in Nepal, for example. The CO2 impact will be different. But said that, in all of the countries, it will reduce CO2. You have to look in the specific project design, of course, on the grid, on the distribution grid, especially the last connectivity there, to see what type of charging you can use, for example, how feasible it is in the depot, etc. But that's more a technical feasibility. It's not an eligibility criteria of the project. The idea of having these programs or projects in all of the countries is to use that as an intervention to foster broader application of e-mobility in the long run. You need to have first a large fleet of buses so that you can show all of the cities, this is feasible, this works, this really operates well, it's financially sustainable, and then you can have a more massive uptake. The same to not just develop e-mobility policies or business models based on theory or on technical assistance, but based on practical cases where you see what works best, what policies really are important to foster it on a larger scale, and combine that with an investment project. So that's the idea behind it, and you don't have a more specific criteria to say this is better or this is worse to include it. No, you look at the technical requirements of each city.
Thank you for your question. So actually within the Gender Action Plan, there is a target to have annual regional sharing, knowledge sharing events or workshops for the female staff of transport agencies. And I think exactly for that purpose, to share their experiences of women in e-mobility. You mentioned also raising awareness, and part of it is ensuring that there are awareness campaigns around sexual harassment in public transport. And then as well, an online module on gender in transport that will be introduced within different transport agencies. So it's already been thought through, but I think it's also important, as you said, to look at, you know, what publications could come out of this knowledge sharing as well, and to make sure that we're capturing all the learnings.
So your last questions that about how say a GRM system will be sustainable. So first thing is that it's actually organization responsibility to ensure that they have a policy. That policy should have the SEA clauses, and also they have a code of conduct for the staff, so that staff should know that what need to do, what is do's and don'ts. And then these are the interlink, that how to build the capacity of the staff, as well as the other relevant stakeholders who are also interlinked with this, the system, that they can have that right to raise their voice without any fear of retaliation. So that's the responsibility of the organization. So these all are the interlinks. They have to have a policy, they have to have a code of conduct, they have the GRM system that should be incorporate SEA-related issues into the GRM system, and they have a reporting and respond mechanism. So yeah, and capacity building for the staff, for awareness building, for the community people, for other people who are related to this project and the organization as a whole.
Thank you very much. More question? Yes, please. Please introduce yourself. And ask
I'm
your
Michael
question.
Alunan. I'm in the public transport industry and also a clean air advocate. We warmly welcome the GCF because there's the grant component, financing component. First question is this course through government or needs prior approval of government when you download this to every country? That's first. Second, because one of the problems in our objectives to ramp up the electric e-vehicle adoption is, bottom line is funding. No? So people will not budge yet unless there is budget. Something like that. I mean, I'm playing with the words. But second point or question rather, is it possible that that same fund can be leveraged and downscaled downwards on a per country to backstop or rather the creation of possible new funding facilities? Like for instance, it can serve as a guarantee, whatever. No, it can come up with all sorts of things that will, let's say, encourage the issuance of local e-vehicle bonds, green bonds, issuance of, I mean, the point is you can invite mass participation of citizens to embrace, let's say, e-mobility adoption. Let's say an ordinary citizen can invest, let's say, 1,000 pesos, I mean, in local currency, or a rich man can invest, let's say, 1 million pesos for a certain bond. No? So it is their way of supporting distrust towards e-mobility, e-vehicle adoption, where citizens are involved. So it's a stakeholder concept of development, because when people take a stake in something, whatever it is, whatever amount, somehow you generate the support. And I think this is very important because much of the bottlenecks, the devil is in the details. As I've explained earlier in this morning session, you know, maybe it takes an entire discourse on how to translate the policy trust, the strategic directions, which we all embrace, and how that can be translated organizationally in terms of implementing procedures, in terms of, you know, the mechanics. That's where the bottlenecks lie, and that's where, in some cases, some areas, and some countries, corruption also, the rent-seeking aspect, etc. So that's where the problems lie. So perhaps it use that fund in a way to come up with something. There can be maybe various potential opportunities using this as a leverage. Just an idea, not just explore. So if it's not possible on
Those are great questions. So the first one is simple. So the funds are channeled through the government. And the financing plan will include the GCF grant and loan and the ADB sovereign lending. So that's the response to the first question. On the second one, and maybe other speakers would like to complement, you, with this program, initiating the program, those program, you demonstrate that e-mobility is possible and can have an impact. So there is also a strong strategy and capacity development in component 4. So all this globally rises the profile of e-mobility in those cities. So it will not solve all the problem and finance everything, but it's already a very holistic and comprehensive approach that is proposed. It's flexible because if the city is already advanced in some way and has particular component that needs to be expanded, it's possible. If a city somehow is new to e-mobility and there is a big push, all the ingredients can be accessed and financed to initiate things properly in the city. Then of course, it will not solve all the issues and it will not transform fully the cities. We said it's sovereign, so but it may also create the condition for more. You were mentioning green bonds. Yes, green bonds can be developed and leveraged in parallel with this program and maybe in an integrated manner as well. So it's incremental, but with this program and for the cities that will use that program and make the most of all the variety of components that are available, you are really either complementing an initiative that is ongoing or initiating something, and then down the road you can look at all these dimensions. I don't know if Jörg or Oli, you would like to add anything on that question?
Yeah, perhaps just shortly, it's a direct investment fund, so you don't use the money to invest in another fund, which is then used as leverage. That would be a different type of program. So it's the leverage factor is indirectly through technical assistance and through having the model of electric buses, but it's not a finance instrument to finance other funds.
Yeah, I understand. The reason I asked the question because the faster to fast track the adoption is, you know, funding, you know. So if we can leverage, which means multiply several folds, whatever you have, and translate this into other forms at the local level, country by country, even by city or provincial or whatever, then you can involve as many. So it's just an idea, but it's worth exploring. Perhaps a new program can be developed from ADB or whatever. So I'm just, you know.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Let's take one more question before we move to the next part of this session, if any. And I forgot to mention at the beginning that there will be no break. So we go until 4 p.m. Instead of taking a break and coming back is Friday. It's Friday afternoon, so we'll just do it in one go. And of course, we can have coffee at 4 and continue the conversation there as well. So if, yes, no, okay. So if there is no more question, oh, okay, yes, please, sir. Please introduce yourself and ask your question.
My name is Lakshmi Prasad Kharat, and I am from Mumbai Metro MMRDA. I wanted to ask that this concept SIA, I mean hard today only because in our project administration manual, this term is not mentioned. So should we incorporate this SIA in our latest means the loan is ongoing still.
Yes,
Excuse me, are you going, I'm sorry, are you talking about an ADB finance project? Yeah.
ADB finance project.
Okay, just for the
For
benefit
Mumbai
of all.
Metro, yeah.
Thank you.
yes.
So I heard this term today only because I'm also involved in JESI in our Mumbai Metro project. That's why.
Yeah, so yes, of course, you have to incorporate SIA if it is, ADB funded project. Yes, yeah.
Okay, so that is clear. So let's now go to the next part of the session, which is which will evolve around the projects. So we already mentioned the 7 countries that are included in the program. 2 things also I would like to remind, and that we have heard already, is that all the 7 countries can use the fund from the program. In the submission to the GCF, so all countries are treated equal, but there is this logic that if your needs are bigger than the money that is, that fraction that is allocated, and the project is ready, so and that it meets all the criteria, including in terms of the share, maximum share, or the financing plan, so that's something that we'll be able to consider. So we want to be responsive to demands. And then I think whether it's ADB or the GCF, if we see that the project is so successful that the entire allocation is used quickly, then we will do a phase 2 top up this financing, and we'll go back. So that's my way of saying that if you are ready, if you have ambitious, let's structure the program, the project, and see how far we can go and how much we can tap from the allocation. The other thing that I would like to mention, now we have these 7 countries that are included. Of course, we have in the room delegates from countries which are not part of the 7. Maybe in the future you could be included in the program if there is a second phase, so it will not be restricted to the 7 countries as well. And if there is a huge ambition as well, as you mentioned, we can also go for a standalone application to the GCF. So the discussion is really for everyone in the room. But to make it a little bit practical, we will talk about the 7 countries. So thank you to our speakers. Maybe you could stay on the stage because you know this project as well. I will invite Arun and Rebecca to join us on the stage. And yeah, so, and we'll ask you to talk, and Nicholas is here as well, okay. So just a free-flowing discussion, maybe we'll ask you to share a little bit about the project. You can sit here or go to the podium. Huh? Okay. And also you can invite our counterpart in the room also to speak. So it's really, there is no format for this discussion. We are among friends.
Thank you and good afternoon. Thank you, Bertrand. This is about the project that we are going to proposed process in Nepal. The project is called Sustainable Urban Electric Mobility Project. This project is scheduled to be processed in 2025, and we will be concentrating on 2 cities. One is Kathmandu Valley and another one is Pokhara city. This project is going to introduce both soft and hard components in terms of public transportation improvement. Nepal's public transportation scene is dominated by private operators. The government is the regulator of these private operators, and these private operators, some of them forms an association, otherwise it is mostly fragmented. So in that challenging situation, we have to structure the project as to how we will be able to encourage these private operators or the associations to adopt electric vehicles in their fleet. The hard component in that context is going to be electric vehicles as well as electric vehicle infrastructure that would be set up in these 2 cities. But the soft component of this project also includes introduction of intelligent transport systems for traffic management, for revising some policy related structural changes needed for revising the tariff. And Nepal is also a hydroelectric surplus country. So it has the input fuel for the electric vehicles are going to be clean. So in that context, how can we monetize the clean energy that is being used for electric vehicles in form of efficient carbon accounting and exploring possibilities of carbon credit sales. Apart from this, in the Pokhara city, which is in the context of public transportation, in the context of Nepal's environment, is a very greenfield city. It is a tourism capital of the country, and we are trying to come up with a total mobility solution which includes hard infrastructure, soft infrastructure, and green skills related skills building activities as well as entrepreneurial development activities. We have the mayor of Pokhara city, Mr. Dhanraj Acharya here. So I would like to invite the mayor, honorable mayor, to the stage to talk about his visions related from this project for the Pokhara city. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, we are honored by your presence and we can wait to hear your perspective.
Very good afternoon. I'm Mayor of Pokhara Metropolitan City. You know, Nepal is a very beautiful country of South Asia, and Pokhara is the central part of the Nepal. And recently we announced the capital city of tourism of Nepal. And we are going to planning the tourism city, tourism capital, as well as we have so many hydroelectricity and other infrastructure as well. So it will be very necessary and meaningful for us to e-mobility and e-vehicle. As soon as Arun sir already said, in Nepal, all public transport dominating by private sector, and government sector is only by the policy and rule, other infrastructure and policy as well as. So in coming days, we are going to planning, including private and government sector. Jointly, we will work together and we will make infrastructure and all sector for e-mobility. And we are eagerly waiting from ADB project in our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And all this is music to our ears because we are talking about e-mobility project, but you present all the dimensions. So I think one of the key takeaways from this week is that we are talking a lot about e-mobility, but e-mobility is not just about buying buses. It's about the service that is provided, it's about all the other systems that are provided and the integrated approach, exactly the one that you described. Can I ask you a question? I'm always curious about the way you perceive challenges. And what is to you the biggest challenge that this project will have to overcome in order to deliver its full impact?
Yeah, so everywhere, every project will challenge, but every challenge with a solution. So in this project, in e-mobility, also we can work together, public and government sector. Hopefully it will be solved.
Thank you. That's the spirit. That's a we deliver project. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, please stay with us on stage and we'll continue the discussion. Aaron, would you like to add anything on the project?
No, it's okay. I can answer some questions if at all it
Okay,
arises. Yeah.
great. Maybe, yeah, we have an extra seat. Rebecca or Nicholas, who would like to go next?
I'm not going to talk too much, just to say that we have a proposed e-mobility project in Jakarta, which is with Damri, and the client is up the back and can probably provide more details than I can. But it does include components for climate adaptation for the facilities, particularly the depots, as well as the purchase of new e-bus fleet and charging infrastructure, and supporting non-motorized transport connections to the stations. So it does tick all of the boxes, and that's all I'll say for now. Yep.
Good afternoon, everyone. Nicolas De Castelli, also ADV transport specialist, and I have the privilege to be working on two related initiatives in Armenia and Georgia. First, in Armenia and Yerevan in particular, we're in discussions, initial discussions to some extent as to how to scope the project. We're considering electrification of the bus fleet and associated infrastructure improvements, rerouting of buses, bus depots, etc. We have a representative from Armenia, Tahir. She can probably provide more details on what we're looking into. This is a very nice initiative, which the municipal government is very keen on pushing ahead, and we're quite excited about it, and we're hoping it will come to fruition. In Georgia also, we have started some discussions with, to some extent, with the Tbilisi municipal government, but also now looking at secondary cities, so smaller cities that also have some needs in terms of improving their public transport systems. Maybe they don't need full BRT systems, say, of the highest specifications. Maybe their inventions are simpler, but still, they do require renovation and greening of their fleets, some bus priority corridors, reorganization of bus routes or the operations in general, and as well as non-motorized transport improvements. So these are things we're looking at, and we're very excited about, and we hope we can move ahead with them. So happy to take any questions. Thanks.
Thank you. So we are lucky enough to have a representative from Yerevan. Would you like to share some thoughts on the project with us?
Thank you very much for giving the floor to say a couple of words. I'm Aneta Babayan, a new director for the Yerevan Development Projects PIO, which is responsible for all the infrastructure and development projects implemented in the capital city of Armenia. And thank you, Nicolas, for presenting what we are now talking about together with the ADB colleagues. And I'm excited to start with my new journey with the organization and city with this very exciting project. And thank you for making this program and facility available. The city is in a very ambitious public transportation reforms, phase, and we are looking into green, climate resilient and sustainable public transport, and this e-mobility stands on top of our priorities. So I very much hope we will have effective and somewhat expedited talks and negotiations around the scoping of our project so that we can start and apply as soon as possible. Thank you all. That's all.
Thank you, and that is great to hear. So I think everybody seems to be ready to develop the project. Maybe I will also invite, if you like to, a government representative from Indonesia, if you would like to share a few words about the e-mobility program.
Okay, good evening, everyone. So my name is Iksan. I'm representative from Damri, Jakarta, transportation company. So we do have a big e-mobility target in Jakarta, and I hope with our relationship with ADB could make that goal happen, and we could make our city even greener. Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to hear, and it's great that Jakarta is part of the program. Let me now turn to Jörg. You know all these cities and these countries. Maybe you would like to share some observation on the project, and maybe from the perspective that we may try to learn from one city to the others. So any thought you would like to share with us on that?
There are all of the countries involved, in fact, have participated in scoping studies which were done over a wider range of developing member countries of ADB. So these countries and cities have been identified as being, let's say, ready for taking up these types of investments. And there is already in Kyrgyzstan with ADB a program on electric buses which is ongoing, and where a fleet of 120 electric buses will be deployed soon, combined together with public transport improvements. So I think one of the facilities of the fund, which has the possibility of interchange of experience between cities and countries, workshop on that part to see which policies work well, which types of business models work well in the different cities, also have the potential to interchange between countries as well as within countries. Often the concentration is also on the capital city, and it might be quite different to work in smaller cities where you don't have the same structures on public transport, you don't have the same public transport operators well organized, so you might need a different business model, you might need a different approach to get these companies or individual owners involved. So I think it's an interesting part that you can start in one city, in one country, and then have the means also to showcase how it works, what doesn't work, as well as what works, and then learn through program facilities and capacity building training for other cities. What I also think is important, one sees there are many technical facilities, Jeff has that, GIZ has that, but then you don't have the financial means behind it. And the interesting part here is that you can combine technical assistance with financial assistance. So if you have a good idea, you can implement it, you can learn out of it, you can make the policy parts, you can make the capacity building parts, and again, get the next investment rolling. And like Bertrand said, I mean, this is one program, you know, it's limited financial means, but the idea is to get the ball rolling, and then other countries might come in not into this program, but you can always develop other programs if there is a necessity to do that and a demand to do that. At the end, it's all a demand-driven process in this case.
Thank you, Jörg. Listening to you, it's true that we realize that within the program we have a diversity among the city in terms of profile, in terms of size. So it will be very interesting to see how it evolves. In the example of Nepal, so we have 2 cities that will benefit from the program as well. So I'm just thinking that the next edition of the Asian and Pacific Transport Forum will be in 2 years from now, 2026. I think there will be a session again. It will be interesting to see where we stand and the progress that we have made. We are getting close to the end of the session, but we have time for more questions. If you have questions to our speakers. Yes, please. Can you introduce yourself and ask your question?
Hi, I'm Marites Alvarez. I'm from El Verde Transport Services Corporation. My question will for Mr. Grutar. Mr. Grutar. Okay, what is the difference between the GCF fund download to Asian Development Bank and the GCF fund downloaded to the Land Bank of the Philippines?
GCF doesn't give funds directly to executing entities. It works through accredited entities. So ADB is an accredited entity, so that's, and you have to have co-finance means in it, so that's why Asian Development Bank developed this fund, because it can do it over various countries, it can do it as program, and it has the financial means to do the co-finance out of it. Now, when you structure the loan of ADB parts, and it also can include European Investment Bank or other multilateral banks also. It's not, co-finance is not limited to ADB. Together with the GCF finance, then you make a cluster out of that, and that will determine the conditions you finally have.
Thank you. More questions, or shall we go for coffee? Okay, thank you. It has been a long week, and this is the last session. Among our speakers, does anybody want to add anything before we close? Okay. So yeah, as I say, it will be very interesting to see where we stand on this program in 2 years at the next edition of the Transport Forum. And I can feel a lot of excitement around this program. Most of the cities are really ready to go. So let's work together. I think that now you know the team. You can also reach out, including for new projects and from delegates of countries which are not included in a program. And again, I think that this session also gives a clear understanding that e-mobility is not just buying buses. It's just transforming the sector, the industry, the services, and ultimately improving the mobility condition in a city and living condition. Not talking about the climate impact, of course. So thank you. Coffee is served, and so you can approach us during coffee. And then at the end of the forum, so to all of you, safe travel back to your country, or for those in Manila, safe travel back home tonight. Thank you very much.